All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of Running with Wolves. I'm so excited about today's episode because this is going to be quite literally me proving you guys wrong in every sense because with my own story, mind you. I have so many of you who constantly come to me and tell me every single person that wants to work with me that I've had a sales conversation with in the last month has told me that I'm too expensive. So I don't really know like what's going on. I don't know, like I need to just bring in more leads. I don't know how to get people to say I'm not expensive, or like I can't raise my prices because people already think that I'm too expensive, blah, blah, blah. Boy, do I have a fucking story for you. So most recently, I signed on a consulting client, and when they originally heard my prices and we had our initial sales conversation, they told me I was too expensive and that they couldn't move forward in working with me. Guess what? Some marketing and a couple calls later, they were singing a different tune and they ended up working with me and signing on. And after our initial strategy meeting, I did like a kickoff meeting with them that was like 4 hours long. They flew out to see me just for the 4-hour meeting. They were like, this is probably like the best investment we've made. And we're so excited that we did this, basically. So before we get into anything, what I want you to understand is that objections are normal in a sales process. In fact, I actually think that they should be expected. Like, I think the expectation should more so be they're probably gonna have an objection that I have to handle and then be pleasantly surprised when they don't, rather than I'm going to try and basically have like no objections or being upset when someone has an objection. I don't know when we got to this point as an online space or like as business owners where all of these coaches are like, if you have an objection from someone, they're just like not the right person that you should be working with, or like you just need to bring new people in. 80% of leads will have an objection in some way, shape, or form. Because if someone is investing a high ticket price point to work with you, or a high ticket price point to have your product, yeah, sometimes they're going to have some concerns, some hesitations, or some objections. But guess what? That doesn't mean that you can't make a sale. That doesn't mean that they're a bad lead. I don't understand like why we've started saying those things, but it is very possible to turn someone who has an objection or a concern about purchasing your product or investing in your service into, they are probably some of the best clients I've ever had. The clients who I've had who have had concerns in the beginning or objections in the beginning, after we walk through that entire process and I handle the objection, they end up signing on. They're, again, probably some of the best clients I've ever had. So please understand, it's not that they're not the right fit. It's not that they're not an aligned client. It's just that you don't have a marketing strategy or a sales process to be able to handle normal steps of that sales funnel to still get them to buy even if they're concerned. That's like, for example, like it actually kind of reminds me in my like toxic dating era of myself, unfortunately, because if like the most perfect person, like again, my current partner, we went on our first date and he was like nothing but waving green flags. And I literally was like, I don't like the way he chews. I'm like, Savannah, like what the fuck is happening right now? Honestly, like what are we doing here? Come on. Like this is the most perfect person. And this is the thing that you're going to be concerned about. That's basically like what you guys are doing with some of your leads. You're like, everything was great. The sales conversation was fantastic, but like they had an objection. So like clearly we can't work together. I'm like, it's like the TikTok where they're like, be nice. I'm finding it. That's how I feel with some of you guys, where I'm like, you're literally going to gain their trust more by knowing how to handle this objection. And like, this is normal. So what are you doing? Anyway, so I'm going to stop like ranting at you guys, but please understand that this is like a full system that you should be utilizing in your marketing and your sales process in order to handle those objections and get them to come up less frequently, but to still be able to handle them when they do come up. Okay. So like I was saying, let's kind of dive into this story. So when this client first came to me and they inquired about working with me, I met with their head of marketing. They had two heads of marketing. One is on the organic side, one is on the paid side. And I did not meet with their CEO, A lot of times I would say this is very common for like my consulting clients, because if they're a bigger company, a lot of times the marketing director or like the CMO or things like that are the people who saw like my video initially and inquired, right? Because it's like a standard, sales process. They're going to make sure that it's the right fit to then take to the higher ups because they don't want to waste their time. So that was totally fine. But as like with most scenarios that I've had, as soon as I told them the price point, they were like, yep, great, sounds good. Because in their brains, because they have marketing brains, they understand how that investment will equate to the ROI that I'm going to create for them, right? Done deal there. They were like, we're going to take it to the higher ups, have a conversation, see if it's open. They came back to me and they were like, hey, we would love to work with you, but unfortunately, we were told that it was just too expensive. We just can't do it at that time. Is there maybe something less expensive we could do? Or like, how can we kind of still work with you? This is our budget. And it was very minimal. And I was like, is this on an ongoing basis? Is this like a one-time thing? And they're like, no, it's just a one-time thing. And I basically was like, okay, in my professional opinion, because you can't answer like A, B, and C, which we'll get into those specifics in just a second, I think that giving you guys like a one-off consulting session is actually going to do you guys a disservice. And I would feel uncomfortable selling you that, to be totally frank, which I completely still agree with. And they were like, okay, like give us a day, basically, because we're going to try to talk to the CEO again. And I was like, okay, no problem. And I was like, I will happily get on a follow-up call with all of you guys. I'm more than happy to like have a conversation with your CEO, whatever you guys need to like make this happen. They're like, okay, sounds good. So they come back and they go, can you get on a call with our CEO? I said, yeah, absolutely. Got on a call, answered all the questions, concerns, hesitations. Biggest question he asked me was like, what percentage of your clients don't see results? What's the worst case scenario you've ever seen? Blah, blah, blah. And I basically told him the worst case scenario I've ever seen is that I literally have a client ghost my services. And those are the people, and again, it's probably like one per year, that do not see results, truly because they don't engage in the program. And here's all my processes for making sure that they stay engaged, that they stay held accountable, but ultimately I can't do anything if they don't necessarily want to engage, and I can continue following up, blah, 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 right? Answered his concerns, and they were like, okay, give us some time. We would love to see more social proof, things like that. Want to talk to a couple of your existing clients, which I was like, yep, totally fine. Sent them all of that. And then they gave us the green light. So we went ahead, and now they're both raving fans. So when it came to handling this is too expensive objection, obviously I glossed over like the sales conversation or the response that I gave them, but I also didn't mention to you guys what marketing was that I put out. The first step in handling any objection on the marketing side of things is to identify the gap that's holding that lead back from hitting their goals. So if you guys are doing sales conversations right, you should have a very clear understanding of, in whatever industry you're in, where that lead is at, what they're struggling with, how they're living that on a day-to-day basis, and what their goals are. And basically like what's holding them back from hitting that goal. What are they doing right now that makes them think that they're going to get those results that actually isn't? And what are they doing right now that's like costing them something? Essentially, where are they wasting time, effort, energy, finances, etc., in a way that they think is going to help them hit their goal that you know as the expert is not. So for example, if you're a fitness coach and you know that this person is in the gym working out consistently, but the exercises that they're doing are not actually going to help them like build muscle, or they're not eating enough to build muscle, they're like still eating in a calorie deficit, and you're like, well, yeah, no shit, you're not building muscle, like you're just not eating enough, basically. So like, you know that what they're doing actually isn't going to get them to their result because you're the expert, but they're kind of shooting themselves in the foot. Or on the marketing side of things, this particular client, they have an entire marketing team of like 5 or 6 people. They're marketing on every platform, and yet they're getting good views, good engagement, but the sales on the organic side of things are not matching the efforts nearly enough. They're doing some paid advertising because they're already making more than $1 million in sales per year. However, on the paid side, they're paying a lot in ads for not a lot of results comparatively. And a lot of it comes down to the fact that they don't know what converts their audience into a sale. Right? So they've tried all of these different things, but they're still not seeing results because they don't have that clarity. So when I created some marketing to objection handle and to create some urgency as to why they should invest, the post that I created was, you could have made an extra $1 million in sales this year, but you spent 12 months pulling the wrong lever. And I basically talked about how unless you have clarity in what gets your audience to buy, every moment you spend on marketing, every dollar you spend on ads, every employee that you hire to do your marketing, like to essentially get the marketing out, is a waste of time, effort, energy, and finances, because you're not going to get that back when it comes to your sales. And so I put that content out to basically get them to be like, fuck, she's right. And guess what? It did. So I put that marketing out to basically get them to understand that until they got this clarity, which is the thing that I was going to give them, they were going to continue to spend all of this time, effort, energy, and money on marketing that wasn't going to get them to their goal. That was the missing piece. And until they solved for that problem, nothing was going to change on the results side of things. And so I showed them through storytelling the cost of that gap in a very visceral way. All right, so let's talk about a lot of mistakes that I see business owners making when it comes to objection handling. The first mistake that I see a lot of business owners making is that they do not objection handle in their marketing. They just objection handle in their sales conversations. It was really interesting. I was actually having a conversation with an accelerator client this week, and she basically came to me and she was like, I have consistently gotten the same objection probably 10 freaking times this week. I don't understand what I'm doing wrong, blah, blah, blah. And the week prior, I had told her the reason you keep getting these objections is because, number one, you're not converting enough in your content. You're not solution selling, social proof, objection handling. She's clear on the exact topics she needs to put out in order to make that happen. She just hasn't done it yet. And don't worry, we talked about her block and like why that was coming up and things like that. And she's fine now. But it was funny because she came back to me and she was like, I just got this objection again. Like, how do I handle this? Like, how do I prevent this from happening? And I go, did you implement the converting content that we talked about last week? And she goes, no. And I go, okay, here's the thing. You can absolutely objection handle in this sales conversation and you can be the best objection handler ever. However, if you want someone to not have an objection, that comes from your marketing. And I would venture to even say that if that objection still comes up and it's in your marketing, it's a lot easier to solve in the sales process, because most people have an objection because they either don't see the value in working with you or purchasing your product yet. Like your marketing didn't build that enough. There's not enough trust or there's not enough urgency. Those are kind of like the core reasons why objections come up in sales conversations. And so yes, you can handle that to the best of your abilities, but if that wasn't built into your marketing and even the initial part of that sales conversation, nothing is going to change. So for this client specifically, here's what I did in my marketing. Number one, I created content addressing the exact objections I saw in their industry. So for them, it was finances, and it came down to that ROI because their CEO hadn't seen my social proof. So I did a ton of social proof. And I also actually did a couple of pieces of content where I was like, if your marketing team can't answer these questions, that's a time to basically pause and reflect on if you need additional help, like clarity and strategy and things like that, like someone to come in and train your marketing team essentially. Number two, I diversified social proof. So for them, they're a product-based business, but their product prices really range, interestingly enough. They can sell $10 products. They can sell $5,000, $10,000, $50,000 products. They sell a wide range of price points. And so I showed a wide range of price points in my social proof on the product and the service-based side of things. If it was service-based side of things, I basically showed like digital products, and then I showed like physical products, for example, on the product side of things. And then lastly, every single post was intentionally objection handling content that primed that audience that was ready to go. Here's why this worked. If your audience is educated, primed, and sees real proof of concept of the results your product or your service creates with with content specifically breaking down how those results were achieved, it's much easier to get them to be like, oh yeah, well, that's a no-brainer. I have to purchase or invest, because they see that it's like worth the investment basically, or the price point. So for example, for a product-based business, let's say I'm marketing for La Mer, which is a very expensive skincare product. If I can show the difference in results that a La Mer moisturizer uses or creates versus a La Roche-Posay skincare brand, like their moisturizer, which I use, it's like $30. You get it at the drugstore. It's great. If I can show that this is $30 and this is $500, that's more than 10 times, almost 20 times the price point of the moisturizer that I'm using. But if it creates 20 times the result, I would potentially consider purchasing that, because even though it's more expensive, it's going to get me better results. So if you can show that to your audience, you avoid a lot of the financial objections, because they see that it's worth it, right? Same thing on the service-based side of things. You could break down a client who invested in like high-ticket coaching, like a personal fitness trainer, for example, right? And if you can show, hey, this person tried to DIY their own fitness journey for a year, and these are the results that they created. Then they worked with me for 2 months and I created these results for them, and these are better. Yes, the personal trainer is very expensive, but it's less expensive than trying to DIY and use ClassPass and like buy expensive groceries and all the things on your own for 12 months to see no results, right? Marketing handles objections. And in this case for me, it handled their objections before I even got on that secondary call with them. All right, mistake number 2 is only putting your objections in your marketing, right? So for a lot of people, like I said, their mental like misconception is, oh, well, I will just handle my objections in my marketing, my audience's objections. And if there's an objection in the sales conversation, they're just not the right fit for me. Wrong again. We're absolutely not doing that. It is a dual system. You have to handle your objections in your marketing, and you also have to handle them in your sales conversations. Okay. So here's how we did that. I made sure that the sales conversations were just as strategic as the marketing. So I asked questions. This is the thing I always say about handling objections in your marketing. Ask them, don't tell them. So when they said to me, well, it's just a little bit too expensive, blah, blah, blah. When I got onto that call with the CEO, I basically ran through what I ran through with the marketing directors that I met with the first time. And I talked about all of the effort that they were putting in, all of the money that he was spending on payroll for 5 people on a marketing team to have no freaking clue what converts their audience into a sale. And I basically talked about how he could continue paying all of those people for the next year with no increase in sales, or he could spend a little bit of extra money for 6 months to basically have an exact marketing strategy that not only creates results, but then on top of that, they have full autonomy over why things are working, why they're not, how to pivot and shift, how to create results, how to grow all the things through their marketing. Okay. So then when he said, well, I don't know, it's just a little bit expensive. If anyone gives you an objection, ask an open-ended question. The first thing that I see people doing when they go into an objection handle is they try to explain the value. I do not explain my value. I ask questions to get people to see the value. Here's the difference. So someone would basically say, if I'm a service-based business, oh, well, that's just too expensive. I totally understand that that can feel really expensive, but you're getting all these things. You're getting calls, you're getting me in Slack 24/7, you're getting me to work with your team, you're getting blah, blah, blah. So I know that it's expensive, but obviously it's a lot of things that you're getting, and it's great results and blah, blah, blah. That is going to go right over their heads, because guess what? The second you try to explain something to somebody in a sales conversation and handle an objection, if you are telling them, they equate it to you selling them on it, and immediately the wall goes up, lights are on, nobody's home. They're not even fucking listening to you, because all you're doing is talking at them and they're not engaged in the conversation. So what I tell my clients is that people will actually give you all the information that you need in order to handle an objection if you ask enough questions and if you ask the right questions. You can't just ask random questions. But so, for example, if someone told me, oh, it's just too expensive, the first thing that I always say, well, first of all, there's a lot that I do in conversations, like sales conversations, building up to this point to prohibit any sort of objections and prevent any sort of objections. So a lot of times before the objection even comes up, I use what I call like the yes ladder, which is to ask a bunch of questions to get clear on what their gap is. I position the solution of my services, like pitch the program, pitch my services. Is this exactly like the kind of support that you need? Yes. Is there anything that you feel like is still missing for you that would make this anything but like a hell yes for you as far as this service goes? No. Okay, great. Then I go and I pitch the price. Oh, it's too expensive. Well, hold on. You just told me you don't know how to fix XYZ problem, and this is the exact support that you need in order to get to that goal that you have. I understand, obviously, it sounds like it's a little bit too expensive for you. Where do you feel like the disconnect is for you? Or where do you feel like it's too expensive? Is it the total investment? Is it the per month amount? I basically ask them, like, what's coming up for you? Why does it feel too expensive? And then a lot of times they'll be like, oh, well, it was kind of just sticker shock. It feels like a lot all at once, blah, blah, blah. And then that's where, again, they give you more information, because a lot of times I'll just say, like, if it feels too expensive, what that basically tells me is that it just doesn't sound worth it to you, basically. And so I guess my question is, if you didn't invest in this, what are you going to do about XYZ problem we just talked about to help you hit your goals? I don't know. Okay. So if you don't know what you're going to do to overcome this problem and to basically get to your goals, I understand this feels expensive, but like, are you just not going to get to your goals? Right? So you're almost asking them questions to remove any of the hurdles, any of the objections, it's almost like the excuses to get to the core root of the issue, which is typically fear. Right? I've just made investments like this before and I didn't see any ROI. Okay, there it comes, right? Like that's a lot of times that's the issue. And then you can ask more questions around what was that experience like, blah, 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 right? So again, if you ask the right questions and if you ask enough questions, I always tell people, if you're trying to objection handle and you don't feel like you have enough info to go off of, that you need to start convincing, you didn't ask enough questions. So for them in that conversation, I basically highlighted the gaps that are holding them back from getting to their goals by asking enough questions and letting them come to that realization themselves that really the only two paths were stay with what they're doing right now and risk continuing with those results or lack thereof, or work with me so that they could actually increase their sales. Because the marketing content primed them and helped handle a lot of those objections already, the call really wasn't about convincing, it was about confirming, clarifying, and closing. And the result was that the out-of-budget client closed. They basically were saying, like, essentially the CEO was like, honestly, I think that all of this sounds really good. I'm pretty sure we're going to move forward. The only thing I would love to see would just be more of your social proof. The proposal that you had originally sent over, like, he just asked his team member to send it to him. And then he was like, I'd love a couple clients that I could speak to just about their experience of working with you. And I was like, yeah, no problem. Emailed it over to him, checked in with them on a Monday. That was on like a Friday. And they were like, yep, we're good to go. Like, how do we move forward? And she was like, the CEO is actually like really excited about it, their marketing director. So please understand that like the scariest like sales conversations in terms of objections that you've ever had can become some of the best clients or customers that you'll ever have if you learn how to handle those objections properly. So a lot of you guys are going to be asking like, Savannah, this sounds great, but like I have very specific objections that are coming up in my conversations and I don't know how to handle them. So let's run through the most like common objections, because they're not abstract, right? There are real objections you will hear again and again and again. So let's run through in your marketing and your sales how to handle those or prevent them from coming up in the first place so that you feel equipped moving forward. So if they tell you now is just not the right time and it's a timing objection in your marketing, you need to do a fuck ton of urgency, okay? Because odds are, here's the thing is that with sales, your job is to turn your service or your product from a nice to have into a need to have right now. Unless you are in emergency medical surgery sales or something like that, which you don't really need to sell people on like a life-saving procedure. Most things that we are marketing or selling are not a need to have. Could somebody listen to my podcast, listen to my content, spend enough time on their marketing and create the same results that I create for my clients in the next year? Absolutely. I've had people tell me they've created 70, 100K in sales, literally just from my marketing alone or my podcast alone. Okay. So it's doable, but the risk that you run is the time, right? I always tell people you throw money or time at an issue. And if they don't want to throw money at it, they're going to throw time at it. And they could probably create those same results, but they're just not going to create those same results in that period of time. Okay. So the biggest thing that you want to ask yourself is, why or what do I need to say to these people to get them to realize that they need this product or this service now? So you want to position that urgency without being too pushy, which is basically like, what happens if they delay? What are they going to miss out on? What are the wasted opportunities? And what could they have? What would they be able to accomplish with your product or your service if they purchased now? And then with sales, ask questions like, what's happening in your business that makes timing a concern? And then on top of that, you could basically say the other question that I really like to ask, and interestingly enough, I learned this from Alex Hormozi's podcast. He does a really great job objection handling and does a couple of episodes on it. And I've tested a couple of the different questions that he asked. One of his questions around timing was, is this scenario that you just mentioned to me? Because a lot of people will say like, oh, I'm buying a house, or, oh, well, I'm just really busy because the kids aren't in school right now, like it's summer. Well, he will ask people, is this like a seasonal situation that's happening for you right now, i.e. kids are in school, buying a house, blah, 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 or is this something that happens all the time? Oh, it happens all the time. Okay, well, what's going to change between now and next year if this happens all the time? Nothing. Okay, well, so how do you make the time? Blah, 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 right? If it's just not the right time, what would make this the right time to invest in this product or this service? Because if this is something that happens consistently, when is it ever going to be the right time, right? Or if they're like, oh, this is just like a one-time thing right now, a lot of times I'll basically ask like, okay, well, what's the thing that would hold you back from doing it right now? Oh, cost or this or that, or I don't have enough time to commit or blah, blah, blah. Okay. Do you know what it takes to see the results that you're asking about right now, or that we've talked about, or solve the problems that we've talked about? No. Okay. Are you willing to delay those results until this is done? And then if they really are, that's fine. That's up to them. But then you've asked that question. Finances or budget concerns with marketing. This is where showing the ROI and the transformation of your product or your service is really, really helpful. Breaking down pricing into digestible packages, demonstrating value at every level. And then for sales, a lot of times for like financial or budget concerns, if somebody says like, oh, this is like, it's just a little bit too expensive for me right now, ask if budget wasn't the issue, what would you invest to achieve this outcome? And then let them articulate the value themselves before you show the investment is worth it. If they're like, oh my gosh, like if money were no issue, like I would invest anything to get this result. Okay. And then a lot of times I like to ask, like, that's the question where I like to ask, like, is it the one time, like monthly installment? Is it the full investment? Blah, blah, blah. And that's where you can kind of handle that objection. This is a really common one. I need to talk to my spouse, my partner, or my team. A lot of times when you have to address both the purchaser and the decision maker's fear or common questions, you have to put that into your marketing. And then that way it really like primes, I would say, that conversation before they even talk to you about it. It's like, if someone says, I need to ask my spouse, or I need to ask my boss, or I need to ask my team, you should be putting that in your marketing as well. You're almost marketing to like two different target audiences. And then for sales, there are two things here. If you are consistently dealing with a target audience who has decision makers that they will likely need to have a conversation with, like, so for example, I work with like corporate companies for consulting. I will literally say for those people, hey, please make sure all decision makers are on the call so I don't have to reiterate any information. And so it makes your process a little bit easier. But if it's like, I need to ask my husband, there are two questions I like to ask. Number one, what's the goal of the conversation? Are you looking for them to be a sounding board? Are you looking for them to give you permission? Like, what's the outcome you're looking for from that conversation so that I can mentally understand, like, what level are we dealing with here of like, I need to ask my spouse, which is a crazy decision. But that's another conversation for another day. And then the other question that I ask is like, what is important for them to understand? I always say, like, what questions do you think they're going to ask? Because I want to make sure that it's an efficient and an effective conversation, since they're not going to be here with us, obviously, for them to hear this conversation, for them to hear this information. Like, what questions do you think they're going to ask? What information do you think they'll need to give you the green light to move forward with this investment? And a lot of times they'll be like, ROI, real results, blah, blah, blah. I'll give them that information. And then I always actually schedule a follow-up call that they bring that person to the follow-up call so that we can go through their questions in real time. And then the last one is skepticism. Will this actually work for me? In your marketing, obviously you want to post social proof, testimonials, case studies that mirror your prospect situation. Low ticket, high ticket, product, service, doesn't matter, but you want them to be able to see themselves in your marketing. And then for sales, ask like, what's your biggest concern about this working for you? Or why do you feel like it wouldn't work for you? Because a lot of times it stems from a bad experience they had with another investment. They've tried everything and it hasn't worked, blah, blah, blah. So you really, again, this is where asking more of those questions gives you clarity to handle the objection, because if they give you this ambiguous, like, I just don't feel like this is going to work for me, or I'm scared it's not going to work for me. And you're like, well, no, it will. And here's all the reasons why. They might not give a fuck about those things. So you have to say, why do you think that this won't work for you? Let them tell you why, and then handle that objection. What you need to understand is that handling your objections in both your marketing and your sales keeps those prospects from moving forward, instead of really like ghosting or dropping out. It's not about being aggressive. It's about being intentional, strategic, systematic, and asking the right questions. But here's the reality that I want you guys to understand is the cost of not handling objections. If you ignore objections, here's ultimately what will happen. Your leads will ghost you. You will face more objections than necessary if you don't put it in your marketing, and you will leave massive potential revenue on the table. Like I said, I did a little bit of like a Google search around this. The Harvard Business Review found that 57% of prospective customers abandoned the process because objections weren't addressed. Over half of your fucking audience, over half of your leads will abandon the process if you do not handle their objections in your marketing, from your content to your website to your sales page, all the way through your sales conversation. If you're not handling objections in your marketing and your sales, you are quite literally slashing your potential sales in half. Keep that in mind, okay? So reminder, objections are not the problem. Not handling them strategically and systematically is the problem. Marketing handles objections early, sales confirm and close. Both work together like a machine. So if you take one thing away from today, it's that objections are to be expected, they're predictable, they're solvable, and they should be handled across all of your marketing and your sales. Understanding that objection handling system allowed me to take them from a no, we can't move forward because it's too expensive, to a hell yes client. And if I hadn't done that, I wouldn't have been able to sign them. So audit your objections, figure out what the top objections are that you're experiencing right now. Think about how to solve them in your marketing. Think about the questions you need to ask in your sales conversations to uncover the root of those objections and how you're going to handle that. And as always, if you have questions around objection handling, send them to me in my DMs on Instagram. If you need help with this in your strategy, I can talk to you about the best ways I can support you in that. So just DM me the word podcast over on Instagram. And if you guys have any other questions, let me know. But I hope that this episode was really helpful for you, to get you to understand that like objections are 100% overcomable. And it's so easy to still make sales even if you're experiencing them. You just have to know how to handle them. So have an amazing rest of your day, you guys. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye, guys.